Hi, this is Ken Deep. I'm the showrunner for the LI Who, the Long Island Doctor Who convention, and you're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
Larry, it's Fraser, and you use "They all say who is Doctor Who? Where is he from? What does he do?"
They all say who is Doctor Who? Where is he from? What does he do? They wonder who is Doctor Who? So I ask you, who's Doctor Who?
Welcome back to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, the podcast that explores the colorful world of Doctor Who collecting, the collectors, Doctor Who merchandise, and sometimes just plain Doctor Who, which is a great place to talk about it. Brought to you in part by Forbidden Planet and Bags Unlimited Incorporated. Hello, I'm Larry Van Mersbergen, your host. I've been collecting Doctor Who for 44 years. And I have gained a lot of experience over the years, especially when I was a dealer back in Chicago in 1985, as well as my time with collectibles and speaking with collectors and working with many, many vendors across the world. Welcome to our 76th episode. So with that, I do mention on every episode, just in case you're starting from this point on, that I did have the wonderful opportunity to open one of the first Doctor Who stores in Chicago back in 1984. We called it Bundles from Britain. And at the time I thought it was a good idea. We made a few bucks here and there and I sold it to my partner and then I never looked back. But then a few years ago, I came across a book called Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America. And wow, my company lives on page 384. That little store that I started when I was 15 years old is part of Doctor Who history. Very humbling. You can find a link to buy this book. Every collector should have one on the front page of our website at drwhocollectors.com. We do not earn any money from this book. We just want everybody to have one. We're happy to be part of the Direction Point Doctor Who Podcast Network. You can find some great podcasts at directionpoint.org. If you are a Doctor Who podcaster, join today, and there's no cost to join. It's just a matter of providing some commercial content for our network providers, and then, you can enjoy, reaching out to my audience. I have a pretty good audience, so I think it might be worth your while. Anyway, for more information on that, you can go to directionpoint.org. And of course, whenever I mention links, there are two links that every Doctor Who collector needs to have at the top of the bar on your browser. I like the Chrome browser because I could put these are the first two links at the bar at the top. The first one is timelash.com/TARDIS Library, or if you just go to timelash.com and select TARDIS Library, you can create a free account. You can keep track of your media, your books, your videotapes, your CDs, your vinyl records, and things like that. Unfortunately, no magazines or figures or anything like that, but it's a really great place to find out what's been published. It's still under development as far as constantly receiving new information, but that is thanks to our friend Dan O'Malley, who keeps the site free with advertising. So if you can handle a couple of ads popping up here and there, that keeps the site free. So we thank him for that. If you need to do more in-depth, and I mean in-depth research, well, first you could contact me. I'll give you that information in a moment because I can help you with that. But the other person I go to is David J. Howe, of course. David Howe has been around Doctor Who collecting for a long time. He has a museum that he operates in England. And, of course, he's got a website called Howe's Transcendental Toy Box. I still have a couple of the old books that were published back by Tellus Publications back in the day. But books become outdated when new information arises, so we turn to the web. And you can find that at drwhotoybox.co.uk. He's a great friend of mine. You'll find that site very helpful. Now, if you're shopping for Doctor Who items and you want to get a good deal, look no further than DoctorWhoStore.com. It's in the name. And that's the web store of Alien Entertainment. My former partner from Bundles from Britain, Mr. Gene Smith, operates that. That's what he's been doing with his time. He's also the showrunner of Chicago TARDIS, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So he's done quite well, but he's got quite an amount of Doctor Who items on his site. Some sales that are really intense and going well. He also sometimes finds incredibly hard things to find. You know, he buys collections all the time. Of course, if you're looking to sell your Doctor Who collection all at once, he's the guy to contact. You can find out more at that website. The other thing I like about DoctorWhoStore.com is if you live in the area, if you happen to be a Chicago area listener, you can select free pickup from the store, which saves on those shipping costs. It's a great deal. So there you go. So for that, you can also find some great items at Forbidden Planet, but you don't need to go to Forbidden Planet or go to their website. You can go to my website at DoctorWhoCollectors.com, select merchandise links, and shop from Forbidden Planet right from the convenience of my website. Why do that? Well, we get a portion of those earnings, and that helps us keep the show on the air. So there you go. Also, don't forget our eBay store. We've had quite a bit of traffic on our eBay store recently. We just sold a 3-book set of first edition Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books that I bought back in the early 80s in Canada on Pan Books. Apparently, I didn't know they were valuable, but I can't read them anymore because the print is too small. So I have a large print edition that I am reading again. I love that book. So there you go. We've got a lot of Target books. We got some hardcover books. The store will, is going to keep going as long as we can pay for the podcast. So there you go. Don't forget, of course, my good friends at Who North America. That's Keith and Jenny, wonderful people. And you can find them at www.whona.com. That's WHONA.com. And they're wonderful folks. I go down there for Doctoberfest every October. They're the ones behind that. And, of course, our friends in London at the Who Shop in London. You can find them at thewhoshopaltogether.com, thewhoshop.com. Of course, if you're on our website and you notice that in addition to every podcast we published, some providers don't keep the entire catalog on their servers. Who can? It's a lot of stuff. But if you want to go back to my early episodes, even the ones before I had a theme song or anything like that, you can go to the website and see and look up by category, or you can look up what you want to find out, or if you want to re-listen to something or listen to a specific episode, you can do that there. We also have the complete guide to Doctor Who classic hardcover books. These are the books that were published by Universal Tandem, i.e. either Alan Wingate or W.H. Allen, in cloth-bound editions, some with dust jackets, and they are becoming the most sought-after Doctor Who collectibles on the market. So I have quite an extensive collection of those, not quite all of them, because some of them are just impossible to find these days. I was one of the largest distributors of those books back in the 80s, and nobody wanted them back then, but now everybody wants them. So we have that information, including a lot of reprints that people weren't aware of, and whenever we get new information, we do post it there. What's happening? Doctoberfest 2024 still in preparation. I have no announcements yet, but I do have some announcements here for Chicago TARDIS 2024 next Thanksgiving weekend. So that will be the Friday, Saturday, Sunday immediately following the big turkey holiday. And you got to come to this one. This one's a good one. It's the 25th anniversary of Chicago TARDIS, and we've got some guests here. The first guest that was announced, of course, was Annette Badland. She was the pub owner in Ted Lasso, but also played as Slitheen. And now we got some doctors here. Paul McGann, the 8th Doctor, will be joining us. He was unable to join us last year because he was busy filming, but not only is Paul McGann coming, he's bringing his son, Sonny, who does some voice work with Big Finish, so that'll be fun. We've got Sylvester McCoy coming back, even after rumors that he was not coming back due to retirement. No, he's coming back. He loves Chicago TARDIS. He loves coming back. He's a great man. I have a lot of respect for Sylvester McCoy. One of the nicest people I've ever spoken to, so just you got to do that. And for the first time at Chicago TARDIS, we've got Jo Martin, the fugitive doctor from the Jodie Whittaker era. She's apparently, everybody who's told me that's met her says she's absolutely wonderful and brilliant, and I can't wait to meet her myself. And I just want to talk to out there, if you happen to be a big Blake Seven fan like I am, I'm also a Blake Seven fan. I would do a Blake Seven podcast if I had time. But we've got 3 Blake Seven actors coming. Jan Chappell, who played Callie. And of course, we've also got Brian Croucher, who's also a Doctor Who actor. He was in Robots of Death, but he was also Travis in Blake Seven. So I'm going to see if I can find a copy of Robots of Death he can sign. Also, Sally Nivette, who played Jenna. I always had a crush on Jenna when I was a kid, so you don't want to miss this one. More guests are being announced soon, so tune in to ChicagoTardis.com for that information. I think that would be pretty cool. So. Okay, so what's next for me? Immediately, as of this recording, my next stop is at Consinity 24 in Milwaukee. That's on Saturday, April 20th, from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. at the Milwaukee School of Engineering, Dirk's building. So join us there. I will be presenting the final live presentation of the 60 items for 60 years, but I'm actually going to do 61 items for 61 years since we've gone into the 61st year of Doctor Who. I'm a guest speaker there. I might be doing other panels. I've got a table. So join us there. You can find out more at my website. It's a pop-up window that pops up there, and you can find that out there. We're also, looking on the lookout here, talking about those hardcover books I mentioned earlier. There are a lot of rumors that I hear about second or third printings of things that have been seen by people but not photographed for posterity. So unfortunately, we have to be careful with what we say is real and what we say is a rumor. So I don't like to put rumors out, and I'll expand on that a little bit more later. But it's important to get proof. But Wingate, W.H. Allen, if you have a book that says second edition, especially if it's Loch Ness Monster, we have a study here. We're talking to collectors all over the world. Does it exist? People have a first printing. People have a third printing. Not many people are speaking up about the second printing. In fact, I haven't seen any evidence that a second printing was done. In fact, the hypothesis is that the third printing was actually the second printing, and they just misprinted, which could be, could very well be. I've had a seller told me about a third printing of Genesis of the Daleks, which, I would have believed that maybe back in the day, but I think we've debunked that. But if you do have such a book that does have a printing that's genuine, let us know. Just contact us at DoctorWhoCollectorsPodcast@gmail.com and put that in the subject line. On today's show, I have an exciting show up for you here. I get to talk with a dear friend, the showrunner of L.I. Who, which is Long Island Who. Ken Deep is my guest. He's got a new book out called The Companions of Who, and we're going to talk about that along with L.I. Who and many other things, too. We found, we discovered we were both teachers, and that's why he moved the New York convention into August. He might be moving it again. You'll just have to listen to that interview for that. Ken's a great guy. I caught up with him on Zoom, and I see him every year at Chicago TARDIS. He's a main stage interviewer, just like myself. I became a main stage interviewer last year. I had Katie Manning on the main stage, which was amazing. So I'm going to hopefully get back on the main stage. Maybe I can talk to the Blake Seven folks. That would be wonderful. Who knows? I don't know. Stay tuned to this for more. While I'm at it here, I want to thank my patrons out there. If you want to see exclusive video content, including my famed interview with former Doctor Who companion Peter Purvis and his story about the ill-fated Trilogic game, and of course some of the funny quips he says about some of the things he's done in his career, you can tune in there, and you can do that for a $15 or a level above. We of course take that money and we use it to pay for our podcast hosting and things like that. This is just as long as I can keep the podcast profitable, it stays on the air. So there you go. To find us, though, you can go to patreon.com/Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, all together like that. And you can also support us at our main podcast site, which is at Podbean. That's drwhocollectors.podbean.com. And you can actually subscribe to us for $1 or more if you want. We thank you for your support, and we hope you'll consider supporting us. Our theme song is Who's Doctor Who, composed by Barry Mason and Les Reed, performed by Fraser Hines, used by permission of Fraser Hines. I believe he has got the say-so for that. Great guy. He actually responded to me and told me a great story about that song, and I had him sign my dust-jacketed copy of that, the German printing. So there you go. It's a great tune. I hear people walking around conventions sometimes with that song playing and realize that they're listening to my podcast. That's pretty wild. All right. You can hear this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, including, of course, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and, of course, Podbean, our main sponsor. Anywhere you get your podcast, for the most part. I don't think we're on Spotify, though. Of course, we are a Direction Point network. You can find this and other podcasts at directionpoint.org. All right, so time for my time. I guess what my biggest pet peeve is rumors and myths. And as a collector, I can't follow unsubstantiated information. That's, just not something I have time for. But what I would want to address specifically is the famed rumor, and this has been around the block a few times, that Target copies of The Wheel in Space were damaged in a warehouse fire or destroyed in a warehouse fire, therefore only a few copies exist. So I've seen copies for that go for hundreds of dollars, some people actually paying hundreds of dollars. And after I dug around and I asked some important people, hey, does this thing have legs? And they said, no, there was no truth to that whatsoever, including a former employee of WHL, and it said there was never any warehouse fire. And of course, sometimes a book might not appear for sale. I mean, we've got hundreds of copies of the hardcover Planet of the Spiders in second edition floating around America, and only a handful have come up for sale. And they're in mint condition because they came from my shop back in '85. But there was no warehouse fire there. That's just the ones that people are holding on to, or they've donated them, or they've given them away. We don't know. But I've got a copy of Wheel of Space. I didn't pay more than $4 for it, and that's just how that goes. It's terrible that drove the price up of that paperback, keeping it away from people. And I'm hoping that I see it on Thrift Books still for $70, and I hope it comes down. I see these, and they're not exactly outrageous offers yet. I think that I'm holding off on that until people finally get the idea that, hey, this isn't right, and we'll bring those books down. What I do feel bad for is any dealers that paid a lot of money for it and are trying to make a profit back. That's not their fault. I mean, they bought into the rumor, but they didn't know. So you can't shoot them down for that. That's just terrible. Rumors, of course, have kind of been in the Doctor Who world for many years, including the rumored 10th Planet Part 4 on videotape that was sent to the BBC, where it turned into a reward but a blank tape. So we keep hearing rumors that there are 6 missing episodes, and even one guy is saying that we verified that. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's true. We haven't seen any proof of that yet. So until an episode gets announced as found and released on DVD and everybody can watch it again, I'm not going to buy into that. I did a podcast on the Ultimate Collectible, and it's not something that I don't hold any missing episodes. That would not be in my area. If I did find one, I would want it returned so everybody could watch it. It was just the right thing to do. But I'm a Doctor Who fan. The people that own these or propose or alleged to own these are just film collectors. So that's between them and their conscience. So that's it's a shame that we have to go through that, and people passing off rumors of, I've seen third printings of this. Third printing of the Space War was a good one too, because we looked into that. We talked to many experts, and we determined that was a load of hooey. There is no third printing of Space War. The second printing, though, the date of when it was released is a little bit in doubt, because I've got 2-3 different dates. Because I keep my books in publication order, I haven't found a definitive date for that one yet. I mean, I've got a few good leads, but if they just rejacketed that book and put it out there on the Wingate, especially with a Wingate label into the W.H. Allen era, it just means they reused materials and didn't want to reprint the jackets. So I don't know. But we'll see. That's just how that goes. The other thing that really bugs me too is when I see fan-made books being sold. Like the Cyberman Omnibus or the Master Omnibus. They all look like W.H. Allen books, but only the Dalek Omnibus was released by W.H. Allen. Sadly, not in the United States, because I really wanted it, and they would not sell it to me. They said it was only for sale in the UK. I'm like, that's too bad. But hey, anyway. Also, I've seen some fake blue spines. That's also confusing collectors out there. I have a fan-made hardcover, a couple of those in my collection, just to show to people what to avoid or what to look for. And it's I've got a Loch Ness monster with a blue spine but a third printing inside, which means it was made by somebody, and a copy of Survival that was the blue spine made into a hardcover. So I got those as I didn't pay much for those. I think it was part of a bulk buy. One of those things where I usually get things in bulk. So there you go. That's, just that. Just be aware out there that, sometimes there's rumors and myths and people debunk them, and ask for, if you want to get, information, contact David J. Howe. He's a good guy. He will give you an honest answer to the best of his ability, because he was around there. He worked for Virgin Publishing. He did the Target book. He got knee deep into that stuff. So if there is something out there, he might know about it. I might know about it too. I don't know. We'll see. I've been doing research myself. I try to give accurate and helpful information. So I'm not going to put out those rumors. So anyway, thank you for listening to my time. So we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to just have our main story today with our interview with Ken Deep and the Most Outrageous Offer. We'll be returning with our tribute to the late Gene Airy with some more readings and future episodes. But if you'd like to help us out with that, we're seeking some female voice talent who would like to volunteer their time and read some of the stories. We have a definitive mature story that she wrote in the Blue Guardian called The Doctor and the Lieutenant. We've got several poems, and we're still looking at more stories to bring to you. Anyway, I'm glad you're listening to that. Anyway, stay tuned.
Traveling the Vortex.
Are you ready to embark on an epic journey through time and space? Join the thousands of Whovians around the world who've discovered Traveling the Vortex, the ultimate Doctor Who podcast for die-hard fans and curious newcomers alike.
Every week, we dive deep into the Whoniverse, discussing the episodes, theories, and hidden gems. We dissect the Doctor's adventures, share behind-the-scenes stories, and explore the legacy of this iconic show.
Traveling the Vortex brings fans together, fostering a global community of Whovians. Whether you're a fan of classic or new Who, there's something for everyone.
Join us on this incredible journey as we unravel the mysteries of time and space.
Don't miss out. Subscribe to Traveling the Vortex today on your favorite podcast platform.
Traveling the Vortex. Your ticket to adventure awaits.
Traveling the Vortex is a proud member of the Direction Point Podcast Network. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
Hi, I'm Juliet.
And I'm Nathan.
Experience Doctor Who from the very beginning through a classic fan's eyes.
And through the eyes of a new Who fan.
Reminisce and relive those classic moments with Nathan as he offers fun insight.
Or experience them for the first time with Juliet as she dwells on social issues, history, fashion, and the size of a flashlight.
We're the Time Streams Podcast.
Find us on Spotify, Stitcher, or Apple Podcasts. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
The vervoids are probably the best dirty joke in Doctor Who.
They're hermaphroditic plants.
A lot of plants are.
So there you go. It's based on science.
No, they'll ship anything.
There are probably 11 and handle shippers out there. You just have to drill a hole where his mouth is, and you're all set.
You know he needs the room. I've seen it in pictures.
I'm not saying you're not a fan. I'm saying you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Doctor Who gives a drunken Doctor Who podcast for the end times.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space, in a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson,
Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse. On Shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to the Doctor Who Collectors podcast. Keep collecting.
Up there is the scanner, those are the doors, that is a chair with a panda on it. Sheer poetry, dear boy.
And it's time for the main story on the Doctor Who Collectors podcast. Doctor Who conventions are a way of life for many, many people and have been for many decades. At least for me, I started in 1983 and I haven't looked back. My guest today is the showrunner for the Long Island Doctor Who, Long Island Who, or LI Who to those that go. And also he's the editor of a new book called The Companions of Doctor Who. So please welcome to the show, Ken Deep. Ken, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Larry. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I know our paths have crossed over the years. We both go way back in this world, and it's kind of nice to talk to somebody from the same generation. So it's always nice for that. How long have you been running LI Who?
A little over a decade now. I think this is our 11th year.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's great to have conventions back. When I started going to conventions in the early 80s, we just had the small ones in Chicago and then the real big one in 84 and 85. And then of course, 86 didn't happen. So we kind of kept going. And when I parted, I was in business with Gene Smith until about 87. And when we parted company, it was actually an interesting conversation because he said, if I ever run a convention, which I never will, this is how I would do it. And of course, as we know, he's been running Chicago TARDIS for a long time. So it's kind of an interesting aspect. So I just talking about that for just a moment. What are the unique challenges to running a convention?
To herd cats, pretty much the old joke about herding cats is convention running. The thing I probably wasn't prepared for is the need to be an expert in a whole bunch of subjects that I didn't think that I'd ever have any expertise in. So I learned about attrition rates and all kinds of hotel and airline inside scoops and things like that. Like the thing about doing a convention is that you're called upon to dig into skills you didn't realize you had, or you had to learn them. And it's been humbling, but it's also been very satisfying. And I think every time you think, oh, I'm exhausted, I never want to do this again, there's something about it. There's something about seeing your friends and your fellow Whovians enjoy themselves. And when you see like a magic moment happen, it all makes all the other stuff just fade away, and it makes it all worthwhile.
Oh, that's exactly my thought too. Because every time I'm invited to go to one, or I go to my regular, haunting out here in the Midwest, it's just seeing people that some of whom I've seen for 40 years, some I've seen for just a few years, and of course the Doctor Who celebrities that are usually there. It just brings the whole world to life. And I think, especially for the young fans, when I see a young fan who's absolutely starstruck, it just like, yeah, that's me when I was a young kid. When I shook hands with Tom Baker back in '84, I was like, I can't believe this is happening. That's exactly. Yeah. So that's a wonderful thing. Of course, I've never been to LI Who. It's on my bucket list. Of course, it's in late August usually. I think. Do you have the dates for the next one all ready to go?
So for 2024, it's August 23rd, 24th, and 25th. And that's roughly where we're going to stay going forward. It was in November for a long time. As you know, we shared a lot of guests with Chicago TARDIS, which was very helpful. But as a teacher, it seems to be a little bit easier having the summer off to kind of plan and work on it. That was an unexpected advantage of moving it. I moved it this past year because of the 60th anniversary and the risk that maybe the BBC would do something in November. And if they certainly wouldn't call me and tell me, hey, Kenny, we're doing an event, they would just do it. And that there was a risk that had they put it on my weekend, they would have bankrupted me because you have to do commitments so far in advance from flights and hotel deposits and things like that. If they just plopped it down there, I'd be in a lot of trouble. So it was the prudent move to do in 2023. And it just worked out, actually. I know this is going to sound unbelievable, but I actually enjoyed myself this year because I could actually spend time. I didn't have to rush back to work. As a teacher, taking time off is a big no-no. So, in November, it was tough. I had to run right back to work. And it was wonderful that a lot of my friends got to enjoy themselves, but quite selfishly, I was like, one year I'm going to enjoy my own convention. And this year was a chance for me to, for example, a couple of friends of mine and I took Fraser Hines to a New York Yankees game. His bucket list was to see an American baseball game, and no better place than someplace like Yankee Stadium, with the exception of maybe of Wrigley.
That Fraser talked about that for quite a long time. When I talked to him last, he was like, American baseball had always fascinated him, and I thought, that was great that he got to do that. And of course, we have this in common. I'm also a teacher, so I know that feel. And August 23rd, it's tough because that's what we start school a week before that. So getting away is tough, but not impossible. So I'm hoping one day I can fly out to the Big Apple and.
Here in New York, we start usually the day after Labor Day. But I know other parts of the country, you start a little bit earlier. And that in hindsight, I really should kind of back it off. I had moved it from mid-August to that weekend before Labor Day because we have a few other conventions in the area. Mm-hmm. And although we're very different subjects, it just seemed like the natural thing to do is, I'm one of those people that, we're a community, not only of Doctor Who fans, but we're a community of convention showrunners, people who organize those things, and to keep, good relations. We were up against one that was quite literally 6 or 7 miles from Li Who this past year, and I know the showrunner, and he's a great guy, and they're mostly cosplay and anime and stuff like that. But it's just sometimes like this year, moving it a week later, it just felt nicer to not be like, hey man, sorry, I put my convention on your weekend,
Yeah, I'm sure that's gotta be running a convention. You got to run into all that stuff and scheduling, and then of course, as you said, booking guests well ahead of time, getting all of their needs met. I've been working with Doctoberfest in Indianapolis. Sure. And so one of my things was to kind of feel out celebrities and get contracts and see what could be afforded and what we could do. And it's still, it is kind of a, wow. I said, wow, this is quite of a big thing. And I know you do it. And Gene does it quite a bit. And, and it's been something that I've kind of just dip my toe into a little bit just to help out the folks at Who North America. And I thought, wow, this is really something. And I thought, talking to a showrunner, I thought, wow, I'm going to get some little bit of background here on how that works. And you've been very kind to do that. Just a personal question. How long have you been a fan of Doctor Who?
Probably about 40 years, give or take. I've been active in fandom since '85. I was, pretty young. I'm 53, so that kind of gives you an idea.
We're the same age. Yeah.
I started going to conventions, I think, in '84. Okay. I remember it. I missed the 5 Doctors on the actual sort of 20th anniversary push in November of '83. So it was pretty soon after that, because there was so much going on in places like Starlog and a lot of the places, as you know, pre-internet.
Yes.
We had to go to magazines and fanzines and things like that. And my local comic shop, they had a lot of, they were carrying magazines and books and things because there was a push, much like we felt here on the 50th. There was that little bit of extra that was going on. And I can picture it like it was yesterday. I was in my local comic shop and I was flipping through the Doctor Who technical manual, which I'm sure behind you.
It's back there. Yeah.
Having no, just having no idea what it was all about, and seeing like John Pertwee and the Whomobile and Kano, like that, and I thought, wow, this stuff looks really cool, And as a Star Wars fan, and that was really my gateway drug into sci-fi.
Sure.
As I'm sure it was for a lot of people, other than maybe some people who grew up with Star Trek a decade before.
Right.
Because Star Wars was just a trilogy of movies, there wasn't enough of it. So you started to reach out, and that's how I became a Star Trek fan, because I could watch that in reruns, and Space 1999 and Battlestar Galactica and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so along came this other show, and then I was flipping through this book and seeing all these wonderful things. And as I started to learn about it a little bit more, Starlog put out a reprint of the Radio Times magazine, the 20th anniversary magazine, which was my episode guide, and it also had wonderful photos and a poster that lived on my bedroom wall for a decade of Peter and Mark and Janet. And they became my TARDIS team around that time. Mm-hmm. And when I got that magazine, I was like, damn, this show is 20 years old. There's a lot of material to explore here. It's more than just the 3 movies of Star Wars or the 78 episodes of Star Trek. There was a lot of material there, and that was extremely appealing to me. That this was going to take some time to explore, that I wasn't going to grow bored of it. And it's been a part of my life ever since. I've never grown bored. And Larry, probably the most incredible part about being a Doctor Who fan is meeting really incredible other Doctor Who fans who have engaged my my brain in ways I never thought. Everything from learning about compassion to learning about people who walk in somebody else's shoes for a minute, taking an interest in education, for example.
Yes.
Traveling, the whole message of Doctor Who for me has always been that traveling broadens the mind. And over the last few years, I've had a chance to really do a lot of traveling. Mm-hmm. And again, an advantage of having a teacher's schedule is to be able to get. And I all of those things enriched my life, and it all starts with this television show. Mm-hmm. It gave me a reason to do those things. And so for people that kind of mock what we do, and I think there's less and less of that in our world today. There was a time maybe where it was like, back in high school, you'd have like the people who were into this would give you a hard time. I think that's really gone by the wayside. First off, geeky things are cool.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
There's so much of it that's permeated our society, especially in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. And I think as a person who, I worked before teaching, I worked in sports television, in broadcasting, and and from doing that, I'm very quick to say to maybe some sports fans who want to bust my chops about doing nerdy things is, well, I know a lot of Buffalo Bill fans who paint themselves red, white, and blue and stand in a snowstorm.
Yes, yeah, they do that.
In a stadium here on their team, and that's a kind of cute cosplay, don't you think?
Absolutely. They do that in Chicago at Soldier Field on paint the orange and blue across, and they're out there in sub-zero weather, and they don't care. It's all about
once you realize we're all dorks.
Yes, all deep down, absolutely. My inner dork has been a big. I mean, I'll share my quick story. How this all came about. When I was about 15 years old, I decided one day I was going to open a Doctor Who store. And without any, stupid idea. So I did. We started Bundles from Britain in 84, got to 85. And the idea was we were going to take this, because I had established all these pen pals in England, and they were going to the shops and buying stuff and sending it over to me. And I was getting drafts in pound sterling from the bank and sending it out there. And I thought, this is awesome. I'm like, this is great. So I I started going to different fan clubs. We had like 18 fan clubs in Chicago. So I landed in a place called the Many Companions of Doctor Who in Calvin Park, Chicago. I set up my table, and the president of the place said, well, we'll give you a membership here, and you can, just have your stuff. Well, my first customer bought a bunch of stuff. My second customer bought stuff and pulled me aside. That was Gene Smith.
Wow.
So we became partners a few months later. He infused a lot of capital into our little enterprise. We went to the 85 Chicago TARDIS 22 convention. And that weekend was unbelievable because I remember at the time he was a friend of his was kind of making fun of him for doing that weekend. And he turned to him and said, "Hey, I made $20,000 last weekend. What did you do?"
Yeah.
And I was like, because I had never seen that much money in my life. But anyway, that was how it kind of happened. Of course, I was still in high school. I had finished. I wanted to go to college, so I sold back my share to him. And for a while, I had no idea what had happened until one day I discovered Alien Entertainment, and I went, "Whoa, you're still doing it? Okay, that's awesome." Yeah, and it's quite and of course it's humbling. I look at Red, White, and Who, and my little company is in the book, and I thought, how did that happen? This is amazing. And of course, I've been collecting Doctor Who since 1981. And when I did my last showcase, they said, "Man, you must have one of the largest collections in the country." I said, "Well, I don't know, but let me try it out." And I said, I guess I do. So it's quite a fun thing. And when I started doing this show to kind of educate people and kind of entertain, educate, and do that whole thing, and Chicago TARDIS has asked me every year to present some kind of collecting panel. Doctoberfest actually puts up a room for me to bring stuff down to put in a museum, and I had the honor of taking Sophie Aldred through my collection last October.
Wow.
And she was just
nice.
Well. And she was like, "Wow, books in Finn, books in German," and then I showed her an action figure of her she hadn't seen before. So one of the Daypole play sets I said, "Have you seen this?" And she goes, "No, but look at that." I said, "You ever thought you'd be an action figure?" She says, "No, I never thought that." And then of course I started a pen pal relationship with Katie Manning back in '84, which has been now 40 years that we've become very close friends, to where, when I interviewed her at Chicago TARDIS this past year, she said that was like the highlight of her weekend. And she was still, we were trying to get her for another show, and she's just, we talk every other day. It's just amazing to me how that, and of course I've also struck up a conversation with Sean Pertwee recently. So he's going to be on the show very soon, because he's really all about his dad. Now he says, now that Doctor Who is still a big thing, he goes, I've got some things here. Maybe I should showcase those and be, I said, yeah, I think that'd be great, because, your dad was my doctor growing up and on all that. And anyway, I want to kind of segue into your wonderful book here, The Companions of Who. And my first impression, as you were talking earlier about fanzines, this reminds me a lot. And I just pulled one out that I had here. This is one from 1985. Same kind of thing, a collection of stories, interviews, anecdotes, poems, and things like that. That's kind of, it was definitely my kind of thing. And when I started going through it, I thought, wow, this reminds me of going to Creation Con. And there was always a table there. That's where I met a lady. Do you know who Jean Airy is?
No, I don't.
Okay, Jean Airy is best known for The Doctor and the Enterprise. She wrote that story.
I remember that.
Yeah, and she also published one Target book. It was a co-authorship. It was called Travel Without the TARDIS. It was
yes, with the yellow cover.
Yeah, and so that was her claim to fame. She published a lot of stories, and one of the things I did this year is I'm collecting all of her lost stories, and we've got different people reading stories on the podcast, which has been really nice, because people are like, "Wow, she really wrote well." I said, "Yeah." And a lot of this stuff went into Fantasy Empire back in the day, and John Peel was talking about her, and artwork by Gail Bennett is reappearing again. But what was the inspiration behind this collection? I know there was a previous collection on the villains that I don't think you had anything to do with, really. But
I wrote an essay for villains.
I
wasn't involved in putting it together.
Okay, well, what was the inspiration
I was
behind this?
one of the contributors to it, and
Okay.
that's how. Well, I met Dave Bushman, one of the two people who own the publishing company. I've known him since he worked at the Paley Center when they were hosting Matt and Karen and all that during the BBC America days when they would come and do the premieres here. So
Yeah.
I knew Dave from that, and then when he was putting a Doctor Who book together, it was just a natural fit that I would join in. And I said to him, I run a Doctor Who convention. Like, it's very easy for me to kind of sell a book.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah.
he said to me, well, how would you like to handle the second book? This is what we want to do. We want to do it on Companions next. And I said, well, if I can get some free reign on what I wanted to do with it. I liked what we did in the first book. It's a quality piece. It's well distributed. The publishing company is great. But I had a few different ideas for the direction I wanted to take it in. And for example, I enlisted Sean Lyon to write for this book. But I also wanted to get a few people who actually in production. I wanted there to sort of be a knowledge base from some of the writers, either analyzing the Companions in a fresh way, or from a background that involved television and movies, so that they could speak about what was going on in a way that wasn't purely fan centric. I don't know if that makes sense, but one of the things I enjoy is hearing from someone perhaps who as a kid was into Doctor Who, and they decided they wanted to go into production, whether it be television or film, or even writing for that matter, or music. Some way they've expressed their passion. I also liked my friend Gina, is a professor. She wrote it from a more clinical point of view. She wanted to write a little bit like get into a character's head and some things like that. And of course, I got E.G. in there to actually write about Chang Li.
Yeah, that was pretty. When I saw that, I was pretty amazed because I've always been a fan of him just from the '96 movie, and wow, that's really something. Just getting that collection, and of course some of the the commentary by Sophie Aldred in here, and just there's it. Like I said, it had when I started going through the book, I felt transported back to the fanzine days of reading some great collections of stories that were by some wonderful writing here. I mean, there's some really good writing here, and I'm just really impressed with the way that these stories come out and some of the quotes and even the way that there's some interview transcripts here that are really nice. The Katie Manning one really got my attention. I just love Katie. How can you not? But just a wonderful thing about the Companions, and so many Companions, some no longer with us. A few episodes back, I had a rare opportunity. I had Peter Purvis on the show, and he was amazing insight into his time on Doctor Who, being with going for a beer with Bill Hartnell after the shooting, and then finding out on the set from in his loin that, oh, sorry son, we're not renewing your contract, and kind of seeing the writing on the wall, and of course warning others that the writing was on the wall, and nobody paid him any heed. So it was kind of and of course I don't know if you heard the story, he actually took with him the Trilogic game from the Celestial Toymaker.
Oh no, I didn't hear that.
He said he had it in his flat for a long time. He played it, but then he kind of associated it with the fact that he wasn't getting any work. So so one day he got up and threw it away, and the next day he got a call for Blue Peter.
Oh, wow.
I told him, if you had kept that could have paid for your retirement.
That's true, but Blue Peter done very well by.
Oh yeah, he many years. He said that was a blessing. He said that didn't bother him as much, but he thought, as he is back now doing Doctor Who appearances and voices and things, and he goes, man, I wish I'd kept that thing. What was I thinking? He said, I knew it had nothing to do with it, but he was just a lot of fun to talk to, and the people that are behind the Companions are always the most interesting. They have the most interesting stories, and even sometimes more interesting than the Doctor actors. I think there's a lot more.
they see it from a different angle, of course.
Because Katie
It's tough.
always,
go
ahead.
I think the actors who are playing the Doctor, they're put on such a pedestal, and they are the star. They're the star not only to the public, but even on set, they're the anchor. They're the ones that everyone looks to, to get the energy up with the crew and everyone in the production. As your lead actor goes, so goes your production.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think when you're in the center like that, it's difficult. It may be difficult in the moment to be analytical, where someone who plays the companion, they're stepping back and watching it, even just from a step away, is a different point of view.
Oh, absolutely.
And Chicago TARDIS this year was a part of the very end of this book. There's a very, very short interview that I included. It was literally one of those
the Caroline
stop
Ford
the press moments. The book was heading to the press in order to try to get it out for Gallifrey 1. I had interviewed Carol Ann Ford on stage at Chicago, and she told me a story I heard before. And I'm pretty good at, you and I have been reading Starlog.
Oh, sure, yeah.
All these things for years and years and years. And I had just never heard this story. And if I had, it just must have, gone by me or something. But she told a story about how Bill Hartnell and her, prior to the show starting, had to kind of make up their own little backstory as actors. That's typical, to kind of get into the character's head. Well, where does the character come from? What's this all about? And I said to her, well, could you tell us that backstory? And she did. And it was wonderful. And after the interview was over, I said, would you mind if we sat down and I ask you that question again and include the interview in a new book? And she said, absolutely. And I specifically just asked her about that little backstory, only because even though the actors made up the backstory, to this day, it still kind of works with the lore that we know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
She says, oh, well, my parents sent me away to live with my grandfather because I was a rebellious child, and they figured my grandfather could straighten me out or something like that. It was so adorable and so 60s, but it was cute. And it was also, she said, well, there was a great war, and our home planet was in trouble, and my grandfather said, we have to get out of here. We have to leave quickly. This is an emergency. And we grabbed the first TARDIS we could, which was one story. And then she later said, I kind of pictured my grandfather as a tinkerer, the way someone's dad or grandpa might tinker with an old car. And it might not run perfectly, but, they put new parts in it, blah, blah, blah. And that so makes sense for the TARDIS, right? Mm-hmm. Grandfather was tinkering with this old hunk of junk that he had, and they had to get away in it in a rush, but he might not have put all the parts back the way they were supposed to be. All this stuff, to me, in my head, it was just so fun to listen to that story.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I did read that little bit, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. This is a really very cool collection of stories, and I really urge my listeners. I know Ken was kind enough to send me a press copy, but I had to order a copy for the collection, so this will definitely sit proudly on the shelf next to the technical manual, maybe. So
yeah, put it next to the technical manual. I'll be in good company.
But I gotta ask, as a collector, do you have any Doctor Who collectibles in your life here? That did you go that route, or?
When I got divorced, my ex-wife kept our home, and I had to leave, and I decided I was going to move closer to where I work, so I wouldn't have a very long commute. So I'm in an apartment, a small apartment. Until I get myself back up and running. And when I'm forced to downsize like that, I had to pick,
right, of course,
the most important things to take with me, of course. And I had to, unfortunately, kind of jettison a whole lot of stuff that I was dragging around with me for years and years that quite honestly didn't have an emotional significance to it.
Okay.
And here's how I've kind of headcanoned collecting for me. When I collected as a kid, and you and I are roughly the same age.
Right.
Back in my day, we didn't have VCRs,
Nope.
or it was the birth of VCRs, and prior to DVD and Blu-ray collections. So we had to collect things to re-experience the thing we loved.
Yes.
But now that we have the ability to put on the show or the movies or the music that we love instantly and enjoy the original piece of art, the other things are a little less important. So I kept things that were of an emotional significance.
Gotcha.
You know, a poster or a book or some things like that I connect, like my copy of the technical manual.
Sure.
You know,
sure.
I connect that with the start of my fandom. So it might not be the most important book in Doctor Who history, but it is to me.
Absolutely. No, that's what collecting is. It's not about what's important to other people. It's what's important to you. And
right.
I've always been of the mind, you know, I've just kind of been like, oh, that seems really nice. You know, if I'm drawn to something, I'll want to put it in the collection and enjoy it, because I do enjoy it. It's a passion. It's something I've been, and it's also taught me a lot about the history of the show. And I've done quite a few, not just presentations and displays, but because my next year's panel will be the history of Doctor Who in books, going back to the original 64, wow, all the way through the 70s, the 80s, and where things kind of started slow and go out. I mean, I can tell you one of the most prized things that I have is I have not only the very first Target book, but literally probably the first one out of the box. I think I think you were at the panel when I did that. The Chris Achilleos copy of the Daleks. And it meant something to me because I've known Chris for a long time. I've got an artwork on the wall that's personally signed by him because he was going to be on my show, and then he passed away suddenly. And and I thought, wow, that you know, and I got invited to his funeral. So I watched his funeral, first Zoom funeral I've ever attended. But there was a Dalek honor guard, and there was a lot of people that knew him were there. And I thought, what a wonderful way to celebrate. And then Tasha, his widow, contacted me and said, hey, you know, I think he would really want you to have this. And I said, are you sure? This seems really big. But yes, she sent it to me with a note authenticating the book. And I thought, well, that's you know, I almost teared up and said, wow, this really means something to me. And a lot, you know, I'll even share one more thing because I just got it today. I've been after this copy of the Radio Times for years.
Oh, wow.
This is the actual 1971 January 2, the only cover that had Roger Delgado on it, and Katie Manning's cover that she just celebrated they just had Radio Times event. And I told Katie, I said, look what I just picked up, and it's in really great shape, and it's got the Terror of the Autons Part 1 listing in it. And I said, man, I've been looking for this one for 40 years.
Well, that Radio Times was on the stand while I was born, because Terror of the Autons is my birth story. You know, it was the one airing around the time that I was born, and I have a really, really soft spot for that story. It's one of my favorites. It gave us one of our favorite people in Katie Manning. It gave us Roger Delgado. Who, he's just magnificent. And of course, the rest of the unit family, including the wonderful John Pertwee in there as well. So it really is an important story.
I'll hold that up because there's the listing right there with John and Nicholas Courtney. And I got to ask Katie that question at Chicago TARDIS. I said, you were the first companion to battle the Master, which elicited some applause. And she went on to tell not just the story of working with him, but when she and John found out about his passing. And I don't know if I'd seen that story anywhere else, but we got to hear it there. And it just, you know, because for me, I started, well, my birth story was War Games Part 10, by the way. So I was born in 69. And in 1975, Chicago bought the very first John Pertwee package of Doctor Who stories. And this was around September. This would have been right around, I started kindergarten, I think, that year. And my mom had summoned me into the room and said, hey, watch this with me. and it was part one of the mutants because they showed them out of order. And I had never missed an episode after that. I was like, wow, this is my thing. So I started at age 5, and and it just kind of led to, when I got older, I stopped at a comic book store and they had a whole wall of Target books and magazines. And I said, wow, I don't have much money, but a copy of Day of the Daleks in 1981 was $4.81 because there was no distributor. They had to get it straight from England. And that was with tax. The Doctor Who Monthly number 70 was the current one, with a guy I had no idea who was on the cover. It was Peter Davison on the cover. No idea no clue who he was. But I said, well, I got to have this. So that was $5. So I already spent almost, a little bit of change back from my 10 to get 2 items. And I still have those 2 items. In fact, the monthly was signed by Peter Davison a few years ago. The Target book is on the shelf. I've read it several times. It's probably my most worn book because famously, on the last page of that book, there's a big typographical error. They misspelled doctor on the last page.
Wow.
It's spelled DOTCOR. And it took a few more printings before they fixed it. But those are the things I remember about that story in that book. And I watched that story when I was 5. It came on again. Every time, staying up till midnight on Sunday night watching the Tom Baker stories. It was all about that memory. And of course, for me, it was like, wow, I didn't know they made Doctor Who cufflinks. And I saw a Dalek weather vane. I'm not kidding. It was just, all this stuff. And then, then I got in touch with David J. Howe and I found out, wow, there's a lot of stuff out there. And
certainly is.
But I just, of course, and that's an important message to my listeners too. Those of you who are in the collecting world or just listening for whatever advice or stuff like that, if it's important to you, if it means something to you, then that's something that's important. And that's something I always talk about. And I'm glad, Ken, you made that point.
One of the things that I notice in running a convention, I watch to see what people have attachments to.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that you'll see quite often, and your listeners may even say, no, that's me, is when they meet someone from the show that they really admire.
Yes.
Typically, someone will say, I want to say something to them. A lot of people will say thank you, of course. I do that all the time. The first word out of my mouth is usually thank you because I carry it so close to my heart. But quite often someone will say, Doctor Who means a lot to me. It helped me through this, or it was a thing that brought me together, or is a way I bonded with my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother. You don't know. And those things are beyond words. And as we said a little bit earlier about some of the sports stuff, in sports, we like our favorite team and we dislike our rivals and stuff like that. And here in New York, I have a former boss that I used to work with, who is a huge New York Rangers fan, which I am not. I'm not a New York Rangers fan. I'm a fan of one of their rivals.
Okay.
And I used to bust his chops about it a lot. And then I stopped one day because, or I should say, I've been gentler about it. And this is why. He said to me one day, not defending it, just casually, he said, when I lost my dad, every time I go to the Ranger games, I think of my dad and stuff like that. And to him, the game and his team is that attachment, right?
Yes,
There's an emotional attachment. And what I felt as a sensitive person is the more I bust on him when his team is not doing well, I felt like I was hurting him. Rather than the good-natured ribbing that it's meant to be, I felt that he was feeling like he was taking it too personally. And so I kind of took my foot off the gas pedal and stuff like that, and I'm a little more sensitive to that. But that was an example to me of how people make these attachments, whether it's collecting something or watching something or whatever. And for some people, that's religion. For some people, that's family. For some people, that's their hobbies, their passions, their sports team, their pets. We don't know what that is. And one of the most phenomenal things about Doctor Who fandom, and I'm not saying it's unique to Doctor Who fandom, I'm just making an observation from what I see. I love the way people find unique ways of expressing it. So at LI Who one year we did food as fandom, because there are people who will bake or make candy or do this or do that. I made Dalek cookies. They used food as their fandom, right?
Yeah.
They took two things that they're emotionally connected to and they attached them. And it's collecting. It's having the thing and saying, I have the first print of this, or I have a full series of this thing and I've archived them and I'm sharing my knowledge of these things. Because there's a place for that. There's a place for whatever it is you want to express your fandom. And collecting is just another, brilliant way of doing that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's when and I've been encouraged, of course, globally, because my listenership goes all the way down to Australia, to not just the UK, but I've got listeners in Finland apparently, because I did a show on the Finnish Doctor Who books.
Wow.
I did a couple of episodes. I did the episodes on missing episodes, calling it the ultimate collectible, an item that no one else can know about or see. And I thought, I know we had a big controversy, and the guy that published in Doctor Who magazine about his thing, I can't think of his name, but he contacted me and said, I heard your story and here's what I know. And I said, oh, okay, well that helps. I said, well, if I know that's a thing out there. Or people that dig through landfills. There was a guy that dug through a landfill outside of London and found a John Pertwee Sugar Smacks box, and managed to get it cleaned up and refold it, because it was flat with a whole bunch of other boxes, that it hadn't disintegrated. It was still in pretty good shape, and it may be one of 4 that exist in the world. And I thought, wow. Another guy contacted me and said, well, my grandfather worked at WHL and he left me a bunch of books, and he was this stack of hardcover books that were in mint condition, and a guy from the BBC paid him £14,000 for that stack. And I thought, wow, that's and he said, now I can finish my basement. That was the whole idea for that. And I thought, wow, so I did post the picture. He sent me a picture of the books, and I said, some of these are really hard to find now. I picked up one the other day. A guy found it in a charity shop. This is the second edition of Genesis, the Daleks, which is harder to find than the first edition, because only 1,500. Yeah, this is the hardcover.
Yeah.
Dust jacket. As a picture of Terrence in the back here. But yeah, these of course only got distribution in the United States in 1985. I was the only shop that had them, actually. But it was really something to me that those are, I still have people that go out and say, hey, I saw this in a shop and I thought of you. The other day I was at my school. I actually still have it right here. I was going to my mailbox and this was sitting in my mailbox. And
wow.
Thrift Books. So I sent an email out saying, thank you to the person or persons who left me this coloring book and knowing anything about my outside stuff. And then one of my science teachers said, it was me. I parked next to you and you've got Dalek decals and license plates and all that. I figured that was your thing. And I'm like, oh, that is so cool. So it's one of those things that people kind of reach out. And I know that as far as the convention atmosphere, and I see it at Chicago TARDIS, I see it at Oktoberfest, and when I go to Consinity in Milwaukee, it's all about mutual respect and love for everybody. And I see people
absolutely.
Yeah, I see people reaching out and going, "Wow, that is a great costume. Do you mind if I take a picture? Do you mind if I do this? Do you mind if we do this little thing for TikTok?" Or when I met, I don't know if you know who Katie Haynes is.
Of course.
Katie found me at Chicago TARDIS, and she's been absolutely a big fan of this show and been on here several times. And of course, she's been just a very what I call a flamboyant 13 cosplay, and does it very well. So it's and she brings joy to a lot of people. And I said, you should, with like what Jen Greeley does is she goes to hospitals and entertains kids and brings a lot of people who does the different costumes and things. And I said, wow. And a couple years in a row, I sat on the over 50 cosplay panel because it took me a year to put my Peter Davison together. And last year was the first time I got to do it with Peter Davison, and he was very complimentary and said, wow, that looks really close. I said, yeah, I've been working hard. I've been trying to, it took me a long time to find the right stuff. And I found his tailor actually was helping out quite a bit. And it was just, it's a lot of fun. And I've never heard anybody tell me, hey, you're in your mid 50s. What are you still doing this for? I'm like, because I love it. And it makes me happy. It keeps me healthy. It keeps me,
That's right.
It's and the fact that Doctor Who came back in 2005 has re-energized everybody, and we even if it didn't, I'd still be watching the show. I don't know if I'd be doing the podcast, but when I started doing this show, I said, well, there's a gap out there. No one's doing anything on this, and I thought, and a few other people later said, well, I was thinking about that too, but I'm glad you did it. That's it's and of course having things that I've gathered up over almost 44 years now. I started in 81, and it covered, you can only see this one wall, but there's three other walls here.
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean, as far as let's see, let me take you back to the 80s for a moment here. Remember this one?
Yeah.
And not to discriminate, but I've also got the other one. Yeah, but
you have both, of course.
You've got to, it's but I did.
Yeah, it kind of looks like the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like you're down, when they're putting the Ark in the warehouse.
I don't know if you remember this too, but I still remember the original movie where they had actually stamped on it property of the U.S. government, and at the fade out, it burns away. And I've never seen it back in the film again. It's like they took it out. And I thought, am I crazy? Did I imagine that? But other people said, no, I've seen it.
I think you may have conflated when they put it in the ship.
Yes.
Because the Nazis put their stamp on it.
And it burned out.
It
burned away. And I thought, yes, it belongs to no one. And that's, it's such a, and having because I know people have warehouses of stuff, and I know Gene Smith has 3 warehouses around Chicago because I've ordered books from him, and he goes, I'm sorry, I can't find it. I said, don't worry about it. I'm not in a hurry. But that's and that's of course a lot of the things that I've seen at his shop are stuff we've had since 1985. And I said, wow, is this from the original inventory? He goes, yeah. He goes, I remember getting this. That's really something. So it's so much fun. And other collectors that contact me and say, hey, all right, I do a segment that follows this interview called The Most Outrageous Offer. And still nothing has beaten my $1 million calendar, but I come close. Yeah, it was a 1997 Doctor Who calendar somebody was selling for $999,999, and it was there for a while and then it got taken down. But I still see, like, the Dave Gibbons collection is up there for $1,000, and you can still get it for cover price in some places. So it's funny to me. People are actually saying, hey, is this outrageous? Is this reasonable? Is this something? What do you know about this, or what variant exists on this? And it's been a fun journey for me to go, oh, let me check into that. It turns out Marvel Premieres 57 has 4 variants that you can do, or the War Games in hardcover. If you bought the first 100, you got Terrence Dick's picture with Malcolm Hulk's bio on the dust jacket. They stopped the presses, took his photo off, and printed the rest of them. My copy doesn't have the photo, but people have shown me copies of theirs and has the photo. I said, well, that's more difficult to find than this one. And it's been a lot of fun to kind of gather the information and then talk to people and learn about the publishing areas. And I've written to Kensington Press that owns the Pinnacle brand to find out, did you guys print any of these in hardcover? They said no, but libraries have taken it and put a hardbound thing on it, and people didn't know the difference. So it was really quite interesting for me to say, well, no, this was done by a library. This is not an actual hardbound book. Or did this exist or did this third printing ever get done? No, probably not. Nobody's seen eyes on it. And proof of life is always important.
So Larry, they would take a paperback and bind it onto I didn't know that.
Yeah, they would. Some libraries, I have a copy. I actually have a copy back in the archive of The Seeds of Doom on Pinnacle that they took the cover off the book and then laminated it to the laminate. And I said, wow, it actually looks like it could have been an actual laminated book. But and then the other thing that came up recently was, do you know about the White Lion books that came out in '73?
No.
I think I can grab those right off the back here. I think. Yeah, here we go. Those aren't they would have been. They would have looked like this. These guys here. They came out in the 70s.
They don't look familiar to me at all.
Yeah,
wow.
White Lion got the rights to the Daleks, the Crusaders, and the Zarbi, but they put Tom Baker's picture on the cover. And what I discovered is that is that the Doctor Who and the Daleks came out in two different formats. This is the common version with the dust jacket, very difficult to find, but they also did a laminate copy. So this is a laminate. It's not a library laminate. It's an actual book, but it's smaller than the original.
Yeah.
And it's the same book, but this one was probably sold in New York. This one was sold in the UK. So I had to find it for myself to go, yeah, they did do a variant on that. And some people disputed it with me. And so I said, let me take detailed photos. I can tell if a library has done work on it because I'm looking at the binding. There's tape. There's usually something that, because I have a copy of Time Warrior where they took the cover and laminated it to the book, and it's real easy to see. But this one, no, this has been published that way. And then going back through other sources, they said, yeah, there was another variant that came out that way. So that's been kind of, for me, it's been an education as well as being able to tell other people, okay, now you're looking for 2 books if you want to complete the set, not one. So some folks have said, well, I've got this one, but I don't have the other one. And I'm trying to find one with a dust jacket. I said, well, keep looking. You'll find it. It took me maybe 30 years to find those. So if you're patient and you're not, older than me and don't want to wait 30 years, it'll come. It's just, there's still things that I'm still kind of keeping an eye out for that I may never see. So that's just the way it goes with collecting.
And that's part of the joy of it too, is that,
Yes.
Things seem to happen when you least expect it as well. Sometimes you've given up on something, and then all of a sudden something pops up, and then there's just euphoria.
Oh, absolutely. Like that Radio Times that came in. I was like, man, I had not seen one for a long time. I saw pictures of it. I saw somebody holding it up in a picture, and I said, wow. And then one finally, somebody contacted me and said, hey, I've got a couple of these. Do you need one? I said, yeah, I want that one, because now I've completed all the Pertwee Radio Times. And then I did get from somebody who was liquidating his mother's house, and he wrote me and said, hey, I found this Radio Times issue. It looks like something you might want. And so he sent it to me. It was the Tomb of the Cybermen cover.
Wow.
And all Cybermen on the cover and all that. I'm like, wow, it's not bad. And then I got another one that's earlier than that. I've got the Dalek Invasion of Earth one that kind of was the big Dalek. But it's neat. I go through, and of course the one I showed at my showcase, the Survivors from '63, that was just a couple of bucks from a used bookstore, because it didn't have anything really on the cover to do with it, but it's significant in another way. And I thought, and then I got one that has the second episode of An Unearthly Child. So I'm still waiting to find the first one, but that one's still elusive. But it's kind of fun, especially since Radio Times was not published in the United States. And the only one that was sold here was the 1983 Five Doctors cover. That I remember that well, because we had them in our shop, and the distributor said, well, they were confused why they needed to print 2,000 more to ship to the United States. What do they want these for? I said, well, they want it for the Andrew Skilleter cover.
Yeah.
And that's why. But anyway,
I have that in my collection from one of the Spirit of Light shows, probably from that batch.
I bet we crossed paths at Spirit of Light and probably didn't know it.
Well, I didn't do the Chicago ones. My first time in Chicago, probably 15 years ago at one of the artists. But Chicago was a hotbed of Doctor Who fandom, especially in the 80s.
Oh yes, yes. It was huge here. Like I said, there were fan clubs all over the city, and we actually did public television nights where we sat and answered the phones and did all that. And I know Creation was always doing a weekend convention where you could meet Walter Koenig and Patrick Troughton. It was bizarre, and I thought, well, okay, or Tom Baker and George Takei. Where's that one show?
I love those mixes. It was so good. Because my first conventions were creation cons, and I give them a lot of respect for introducing it to me. I'm a proponent of fan run conventions, but that is more recent in that there's so many enormous Comic Cons.
Yes.
And while there is merit to having a big event that can afford to bring in star caliber that I'll never be able to afford, I also tell people who are passionate about the show that they love to check out, if available, a fan run con.
Absolutely.
Because the experience is entirely different. So you may not get the top name actor, but what you will get is that intimate experience, that sense of community, that ability to learn something new about the thing that you love.
Yeah, and that's what I like about like Chicago TARDIS, and I'm sure your convention, where you have fans presenting panels and fans presenting those ideas and running interviews and things like that. So it's not the pros, it's not the same people all the time doing that kind of thing. And I've always appreciated being in a room where I'm listening to three people who have their knowledge and they're sharing it with us, and we're getting a really nice insight into their fandom. That's, you know, I consider your show and Gene's show to be fan runs, because you guys are both fans, and of course Gene's been doing it a long time. You've been doing it for a decade. Doctoberfest is run by fans. I believe Twin Cities is as well. I'm not certain about that.
Gallifrey One as well.
Gallifrey One is also fan run, and it's a better convention than I remember. I know Spirit of Light was a good big show, but there were a lot of flaws with those shows as well. And that's but I'll never forget. I'll share one story. Spirit of Light. Gene and I were in the dealer's room on Saturday morning to the TARDIS 22. The dealer's room opens at 10:30, and the first person through the door is John Pertwee. And he walked right up to our table and started looking around, and he went, "Look at all this stuff." And he picked up a copy of the Cave Monsters and said, this one was my favorite. I like this one. And we're like, do you want the book? You can have it. You know, and he stood there and talked to us for a good 10 minutes. It seemed like an eternity as our jaws are on the floor, and first interaction with my hero. And he said, I've got copies of my book, Moon Boots and Dinner Suits. I'll bring it back later. And so I bought a copy. I still have the copy I bought from him for $20. He signed it right in front of me. And that was just a life-changing moment, until finally his handler found him and said, "Mr. Pertwee, your autograph session started without you." Really? Who's signing my name? You know. And then later that day, I get into an elevator, and I shared this story at one of the TARDISes with a panel of people on Pertwee. I said, I got in the elevator, and there's John Pertwee in full Wurzel Gummidge costume, hit all the buttons on the elevator and entertained anybody who came in and out of the elevator. And I said, honestly, you think I'm making it up? And a guy in the audience raised his hand. I was in the elevator with you. And I thought, wow, you know, that those are the things. Of course, this is before phones or anything like that, so you just kind of experienced it. And I do remember, I was waiting in line for the restaurant behind Elizabeth Sladen and didn't know it until we got up to the thing and she spoke, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Liz Sladen. Or meeting Patrick Troughton in the lobby, looking at the skyline, going, wow, what a city, you know, just that was the things that we take with us as of course as we get older and can remember back to when we had those folks with us. And
that's right. And probably the thing I wished I could bring back from now to then would just be a camera phone the way we have
Yes.
today. But if you didn't haul a camera around, I was lucky in a few of those early shows to have someone else snap a picture of me with people like Tom and John. But I met Patrick a few times, and I don't have a photo with him, and that would
I don't either.
be, pride of place in my collection on my wall if I had that. I actually, just to go off a little bit of a tangent, I think I'm going to use a touch of AI to create that photo, and that I have video footage of me interviewing him. And so the camera is either on Patrick or myself, but at no point are we together.
Yeah.
So through this is again, AI will probably, Skynet will take over and destroy the world eventually.
Right.
But before
not today.
that happens, I'm going to use it to create a picture of me with Patrick John.
Yes, that's for me. That's why that copy of Moon Boots is so dear to me that I'll probably never part with it, because I got that book from John.
From him.
And he signed it and took my money and said, "Thank you. I hope you like it." I said, "Well, I did." I shared that story with his son Sean, and he was like, "Oh yes, moon boots and dinner suits. Yeah, that would be my dad." He took that book he filled one suitcase with the book and his other suitcase with his stuff, but he would check an extra bag just so he could sell books, and then he'd check an empty bag on the way back. And it was before you could ship stuff. It was just
that's right.
the way that worked. And just so many great stories from those time periods. But anyway, before we wrap up, we tell our audience where they can get a copy of this wonderful book.
Well, it's available from reputable and a few not so reputable booksellers anywhere in the universe. Amazon, of course, Barnes and Nobles are carrying it with their online, as well as some of the more local retailers. And I don't want to mention any names just in case someone hasn't gotten them yet. But also our publisher, which is Fayetteville Mafia Press or Tucker DS Press. You can order it straight from them. We're on social media everywhere as well. If you, the sad part is if you Google Companions of Doctor Who, you'll get a fan club, you'll get a this, you'll get a that.
Yes.
So it may be a little bit tougher, but I can promise you that I'll be selling them at Chicago TARDIS this year. It'll also be at LI Who, of course.
I'll go ahead and share this because this was the fan club I belonged to.
There it is. Look at that.
Many Companions of Doctor Who.
And I love that frame.
Oh, the frame was made by a fan of mine. She did this thing here, but I still love the artwork was drawn by the late Bill Eubanks, who was a member of our club. He was a professional graphic designer, clown, one of the first cosplayers that I remember. And in fact, his Davros is forever enshrined in an issue of Doctor Who magazine, the summer '84 special that did the spread on the '84 convention. His is the first picture in the stack, and the rest were all celebrities. And I remember helping load him into the convention. That wheelchair weighed a ton, and he made that rubber mask. He had the leather jacket on backwards. We had to zip him up into it, and he stuck his hand in the thing, and the chair moved. And he was so crafty, just a wonderful man, a dear man. Sadly, we lost him to Alzheimer's a while back. Gene actually took care of him till his dying day. But we were such a tight group. But anyway, my listeners here, my guest today is Ken Deep. He's the showrunner of LI Who, the editor of the Companions of Doctor Who, and a good friend of mine. Ken, thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me. And thanks. This is great. I always hearing about collecting and stuff, and thanks for sharing your knowledge.
Oh, you're welcome. And my listeners, stay tuned for the most outrageous offer.
We are going on a journey, a very long journey, through the world of the Target novelizations in publication order. Every week, we are looking at a new book, talking about Terrence Dix, Malcolm Hulke, and all our Doctor Who novelization friends. Whatever you do, keep turning the pages. This is Jason Miller of the Doctor Who Literature Podcast, a member of the Direction Point Podcast Network, and you are listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Alison Fitz-Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast on the Direction Point Podcast Network. Keep collecting.
All my travellings throughout the universe, I have battled against evil, against power-mad conspirators. I should have stayed here. The oldest civilization. Decadent, degenerate, and rotten to the core. Power-mad conspirators, Daleks, Sontarans, Cybermen. They're still in the nursery compared to us. 10 million years of absolute power. That's what it takes to be really corrupt.
And now it's time for the most outrageous offer, the most popular part of our podcast, actually. The most outrageous offer is an offer that is ridiculously high from where it should be or where it's actually going for in other areas or for on a consensus of sellers. So this one came to my attention not too long ago. Yeah, it's kind of a hard to find book, but doesn't seem to be, demanding the price that I found. So I found 2 outrageous offers here that were really close, and I have a sneaking suspicion it's the same company. But here we go. Anyway, the book in question is a book from 2007, published by Big Finish Productions, called Doctor Who Short Trips, Dalek Empire, authored by our good friend Nicholas Briggs. It's being sold by 2 bookstores in the United States. The higher one is by, we remember these guys? Wizard Books. They come up a lot in the most outrageous offers. So Wizard Books, Long Beach, California, with a seller rating of 5 stars. This is found on abebooks.com. According to this, it's a hardcover book. And they are asking for $5,465.26. Again, that odd amount always raises red flags for me. Why isn't it just $5,465 even? So something's a little off there. But then we also have Gold Books out of Denver, Colorado, which I think is the same company. Because they're both using stock images. They have the exact same kind of stuff here. But anyway, they're asking $5,464.37, so almost about 90 cents off there from that. I consider that to be kind of crazy. That's just ridiculous. So we looked around to see if we could find it for a little less, and we found a consensus here on a price approximately around $80 or $80 to $90 for this book. So we found Broadway Books in the United Kingdom here. They have it for $79.87. However, a little bit more for shipping to the United States. There's also a place called Vagabond Books in California. They don't have a good seller rating, but they offer the book for $100 with $8 shipping, which is comparable. So that's pretty good. And then on the eBay side of things, we found several of these books. Buy it now for either, $100 or $90 or even $89 at that point. So I have a link to one of those auctions. Of course, those auctions could disappear at any time. So, I'm just telling you what's, you search, if you do a search for Doctor Who Short Trips, Dalek Empire, Nicholas Briggs, you should be able to find this book for under $5,000. So again, just to kind of put out there the fact that a lot of times, and if you really need the full explanation, you need to go back to my episode where I talk with David J. Howe, because I think he had the perfect setup for this, is that, the people in question don't even have the book in stock. they're hoping you'll pay the $5,000 price, then they'll order it from the lesser priced people, as long as it's available. Of course, the thing is with these orders, let's say you do, and I hope you don't, please don't pay $5,000 for this, please. But if you do, just hypothetically, if you pay $5,400 for this thing, well, they get the money. And of course, they're going to go, okay, let's see if we can get it from this other place and just drop ship it to them. They won't know. So, of course, if it's not available, then of course your money doesn't go anywhere because the money only transfers, when after the sale is confirmed. If the sale is not confirmed or we don't have it in stock, then your money doesn't leave you. So that's part of the scam. So it's really sad to me that people try to take advantage of our Doctor Who fans and collectors. We were having, not to beat this issue too hard, but we keep coming across these posts on social media. What is the rarest Target book? And the first answer was Wheel in Space. I said, well, no, it shouldn't be. 30,000 plus copies were printed of that thing. And it was all because of a rumor of a warehouse fire that destroyed 90% of the stock. Well, if that rumor had legs, which it did, you're going to, Thrift Books is selling it for $90. eBay prices are up about $100 for that Target book. No, it shouldn't be that way. But, and I've said this before, there is no fire. David J. Howe says there's no fire. Many of my expert collecting friends say there was no fire. But of course, it's misinformation. It's alternative facts in our current culture that are determining how these books are priced, and it's like, come on. I realize if you haven't seen too many copies around, maybe it's because nobody's selling it. The hardcovers that were released in the United States, we had hundreds of copies, but a lot of times, hey, people today, not everybody is putting up for sale. It's not something that, happens too often. I still have my stock, the pick of, I picked the first books out of the box for me and I've still got them. Yeah, they're in great shape. They're in mint condition. They're never been read. They've never been opened. Yeah, will they fetch a pretty dollar someday? Maybe. Not guaranteed, but maybe. I've had people tell me, oh, this book is this much. Well, maybe. It's not guaranteed. We don't have a Doctor Who collectible price guide. Impossible. I mean, there's some suggestions on the Doctor Who toy box, and in Howe's Transcendental toy box had some ideas, but those things are merely guidelines. There is no real definitive, thing like the Overstreet price guide for comic books or something like that. Even that, is kind of subject to, the dealer going, nope, I don't believe that. I'm going to put it higher, or I'm going to put it lower, or whatever. If you've got a book on your shelf and you're trying to get $10,000 for it, and it sits for 2 years, you're not going to make the money on it. You got to bring the product to the market, and if the market is demanding those high prices, yeah, go for it. But they're not. They're really not. And a lot of these younger Doctor Who fans that are just write to me sometimes and say, hey, how do I find items at good prices? I said, you keep looking until you get to what you can afford. I can't tell you the number of auctions and eBay offers I've walked away from because I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't care how badly, nothing is needed that badly that I'm going to sacrifice that for that. No, I've always paid reasonable prices for things, and I've tried my best to educate folks on that matter. And I get a lot of, people saying, hey, you're absolutely right. We need to do this. And of course, we need to make sure that, folks out there know that, for one thing, there was no fire. There was no conspiracy to burn down the factory. The hardcover edition of Wheel in Space is not worth more than it should be either. That didn't get affected. Nothing got affected. So it's just a matter of how many were printed. Now, fewer hardbacks were printed than paperbacks. Paperbacks got 30,000 printings for the most part, except for the very end. They started to go down a bit. And the blue spines didn't get very much either. That I understand. That I get. There's limited stock to start with, and many books get thrown away. Many books get donated to libraries. Many books end up, getting recycled. So not many of them are available today. So it is difficult to get a full set of books. And it's a lofty goal, but you never know. it could happen. So anyway, if you're looking for a copy of this Short Trips Dalek Empire, so I suggest you search it out as many places as you can. There's also the site called Bookfinder. You can find it there. That searches a little bit more. I try to look at independent bookstores. I try to look, especially when I'm searching the UK, I'm looking for things that are not necessarily connected to A-Books all the time, because A-Books tends to be more expensive. They got to pay fees, so that's part of that. But a lot of them have eBay stores, which is not bad, or they have their own websites and they'll have their own deals. So again, keep the search alive. That's what it's all about. And of course, that wraps up the most outrageous offer, and that wraps up the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Thank you for listening. Special thanks to my guest today, Mr. Ken Deep. Ken is a good friend, and he runs the LI Who convention. Also has that book out, The Companions of Doctor Who, so make sure you pick up that for your collection, and that's also reasonably priced. Lots of stuff heading our way. What's coming up? We're still finalizing our time to meet with Lisa Bowerman, and of course we'll be bringing back Tasha and Anna Achilleos, to talk about their efforts there. We're hoping to get Lauren Cornelius back on, especially after her debut TV role in Call the Midwife. And we're also going to bring on the program the principal author of Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America, Mr. Stephen Warren Hill. So that will be exciting as well. So lots going on. I will be at C2E2 in Chicago on Sunday. So just kind of wandering around in my Dr. 5. So hopefully we'll see you then. And until then, keep collecting.
Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who Podcast Network.